Hey, what's up? It's Xodas. Today, I wanted to talk about the Unholy Dk Legendaries. I wanted to talk about what they do, how they function, what they're kind of good at, and go ahead and give you guys some idea of how these things are performing. You're still in the Shadowlands beta, so any of this could change, is all subject to change. However, everything seems to be performing fairly in line. There's nothing that seems really busted. These are all performing relatively similarly to each other. There's nothing too crazy going on, so chances are we won't see any ground-shattering changes coming to these legendaries, but just so you guys are aware. If you like this video, please hit that like button. It helps tremendously with the algorithm, and if you want to see more videos like this, hit that subscribe button and ring that bell notification so you get notified when I upload a video. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. All right, so first of all, let's talk about these in order from how I have them in my bag, and this order is pretty important. So first of all, we have the Reanimation Legendary. This is the reanimated Shambler over here, and what this does is your attacks have a chance to summon a super zombie that will shamble forward towards your opponent and then explode, dealing 2,800 damage and applying festering wounds to up to 8 nearby enemies. This ability is a bit of a wild card, so this one is actually #1 for cleave damage for Unholy DK. However, it does have a problem. It is fairly RNG based. You also got to bank on those shamblers actually being able to make it to your target. And in practice, what you see is that this one pretty regularly falls behind and has moments where it really shines, and the proc chance just goes wild. You got lots of enemies and they're all fairly close, so the shamblers all just collide into all of them. This is a lot of fun to use, and it also makes it to where in PvE you don't have to worry about taking something like Infected Claws, because these things will consistently run festering wounds all over your targets. So this is really cool if you don't want to take Infected Claws, and I definitely had fun running it. However, you can only see the really big numbers. You only really see those in controlled, like on cleave target dummies. In practice, the proc chance just isn't reliable enough to get enough of them out to beat the others in DPS, but there's definitely still, no matter what, some pretty decent mechanical play going on here. Next up, we have Nightmare, which is oddly, you don't see a single ability in here called Nightmare, but Nightmare is actually the Pheromones legendary power. So Pheromones gives you and your minions 15% haste while you are inside your Death and Decay, and enemies damaged by your Death and Decay have a chance to cower in place for 3 seconds. This is really good. This is, in my testing, the best legendary power for PvE in Mythic Plus, AoE, Cleave, all those kinds of scenarios. This is the #1 performer in that case, and it is a lot of fun to use. You get it all the time, every 30 seconds when you Death and Decay. And when you're running Infected Claws with this and you're pairing your Dark Transformation with your every other Death and Decay, then what you see is, because your minions' haste is increased, they get even more festering wounds out onto your targets in Mythic Plus, and it makes popping wounds an extremely easy feat, and you're able to do a lot of them. You've got more haste, your pet's got more haste, and you just go Bursting Swords, Infected Claws, and you just do tremendous amounts of damage. This is a wombo combo pack, and it definitely packs a punch. Next up, we have Super Strain. This is the one that I think a lot of people have been really excited about, because it gives you all the old school Death Knight diseases, Frost Fever, Blood Plague, and Virulent Plague all at the same time. And that's really cool and thematic to DKs. I found myself really wanting to run it just because of that one reason. Now, there is a bit of a downside. It is not the best performer, as you can see here, and I'm going to go ahead and start showing you why I have my bag laid out this way. Up here, imagine this is a graph, and up here is AoE damage, and up here is like the best, and down here is like the worst for AoE damage, and then over on this side is single target damage. So farther off this side it is, the better single target damage it has, the higher up it is, the higher AoE damage it is. So this means that Super Strain is on the 3rd row. It is the 3rd best in Cleave, and that is not going to cut it for a lot of people. It is fairly lower, but what's nice is it is infinitely scaling AoE damage. So if your goal is to do mass AoE, I mean like 10 plus targets kind of AoE, then Super Strain might be the one for you. Next up, we have Frenzied Monstrosity. Frenzied Monstrosity makes your Dark Transformation also increase the attack speed and damage of you and your monstrosity by 12%. This one is not as powerful as 15% haste from Nightmare, aka Pheromones, is not quite that powerful. 15% haste actually affects more than just your attack speed, whereas Monstrosity only affects you and your monstrosity's attack speed. This doesn't affect the energy regeneration on your pet. This doesn't affect your rune cooldowns. So in a lot of ways, this is a bit of a gimped kind of version of Pheromones. However, where this has a lot of strength is in its single target potential. The reason for this is because you don't have to stand in Death and Decay to actually make it activate. Basically, you're trading a little bit of the offensive pressure that you get from Pheromones. You're trading that out for not having to stand in DND. And for that reason, this is the best single target damage numerically and mechanically for the Unholy DKs. And it's very clear why. It's very powerful, and I am expecting this to probably be the #1 or #2 PvP pick. But in Cleave, it just doesn't keep up with the damage of that Frenzied Monstrosity. Haste is a little bit more valuable than attack speed, and 15% haste is just better than 12% attack speed. So that's just how that lines up. Next up, we've got Deadliest Coil, and what Deadliest Coil does, it reduces the runic power cost of Death Coil by 10, and Death Coil increases the duration of Dark Transformation by 1 second. This one has been a very popular one, and this is going to be the one that I was mentioning might be a better pick over in PvP over Frenzied Monstrosity, since it does give you more uptime on your Dark Transformation, and this gives you more time to make plays with that pet. This might be kind of the big brain, high arena rating play. However, I'm thinking that we won't know that for sure until we get there. It does perform numerically a little bit lower than Frenzied Monstrosity. However, it has much more utility than Frenzied Monstrosity does, because like I said, being able to make those big brain plays with your pet and having every extra second to be able to do that is huge. This paired with the extra conduit that gives you 3-second increased duration on your pet transformation and increases their pet damage is also going to be a really strong pairing. And finally, we have Death's Certainty. Death's Certainty makes Death Strike and Death Coil deal 35% increased damage and reduces the remaining cooldown of Death and Decay by 2 seconds. This one is both a really cool one, a fairly strong one, and also a little confusing. So when you read Death Strike and Death Coil deal 35% increased damage, well, first of all, you notice something. This is all of your runic power spenders as an Unholy DK except for one, Epidemic. Now, what I find very interesting is that this reduces the cooldown of Death and Decay by 2 seconds. But you don't use Death and Decay in single target, unless you're pairing it with the Nightmare Legendary, which gives you a bunch of extra haste, then you're dropping it in single target. So what throws me for a loop with this is that if you're not going to be using Death and Decay in single target, unless you're Night Fae or you're running the other Legendary, which you can't run 2 Legendaries at the same time, then why doesn't Epidemic reduce the cooldown on Death and Decay via this Legendary? Because right now, only Death Strike and Death Coil does, but you don't use those in AoE. So that means that you're not going to be getting CDR, cooldown reduction, on your Death and Decay, except for when you're in single target combat, when you would be using Death Strikes and you would be using Death Coils. But in those fights, you're not using Death and Decay. So it's weird. Maybe they're banking on this pull, you mass AoE with your Death and Decay, the next pull you single target, but there's no single target pulls in like any of these dungeons. I have officially done every single dungeon in Shadowlands, and there's not once a single target pull. You never have less than 2 enemies in any given pull, and the 2 enemy pulls, most teams just go ahead and pull the next group along with them because no one wants to hit 2 targets. So I'm just completely thrown off. This sounds like it would be this great PvP one. However, like I said, the Death and Decay thing is just wasted. And then you're like, you see the Death and Decay reduction, and you're like, oh, this is great for PvE. Except in PvE, you're generally not going to be casting a lot of Death and Decays, and you're not going to be casting a lot of Death Strikes in trash pools. In boss fights, though, I can see this being good for Night Fae DKs who want to get those deaths dues out as often as they possibly can. And that's definitely going to help in single target. However, that's a 1 in 4 use case scenario. So I don't really know why this is here and why this is designed this way without Epidemic being included in it. other than just to be that extra flavorful thing that Night Fae DKs can use to get more deaths dues. And if that's the case, then it is what it is. But all that aside, as you can see, it is the lowest performer. And this was something that I was a little disappointed in, because when I saw that big 35% increased damage, I was like, okay, well, this has got to be good in PvP. But numerically, it still falls behind Frenzied Monstrosity, even when paired with Harbinger of Doom, which increases your proc rate for sudden doom, which gets you more death coils. So even with running that, it still falls flat on his face in both categories for me. Maybe as a Night Fae DK this could pull ahead, and I will have more testing on that to come in a future Unholy DK Night Fae video, but for now it is generally the worst performer. So overall, the legendaries for Unholy DKs are very interesting, really intricate. They have a lot of interplay within the spec, a lot of synergies, and I think that's a lot of fun. I've had a lot of fun really just digging into these and testing out every different kind of build and just kind of seeing what you can actually pull off with this stuff. So yeah, these are really freaking cool. I hope that you think they're cool too. Let me know what you think and what build ideas you have, because there's so many things. There's conduits too that go on top of this, and soul binds, and it really all just has so much interplay. It's really interesting. So let me know what your ideas are in the comment section down below. And hit that like button if you like the video, helps tremendously with the algorithm, and hit that subscribe button and ring that bell notification if you want to be notified when I upload a video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.